Jessica Watson is an Australian sailor who gained international recognition for her solo sailing journey around the world at the age of 16. She was born on May 18, 1993, in Queensland, Australia. In 2010, she became the youngest person to sail solo, non-stop, and unassisted around the world. Her voyage, known as Ellis Pink Lady, lasted for 210 days and covered a distance of approximately 23,000 nautical miles. Jessica faced various challenges during her journey, including rough weather conditions, equipment failures, and fatigue. Despite these obstacles, she persevered and successfully completed her voyage on May 15, 2010. Watson was born on the Gold Coast, Queensland. The second of four children of New Zealand-born couple Roger and Julie Watson, who moved to Australia in 1987. When Watson was 11 and they were living on the boat, her mother read Jesse Martin's book Lionheart, A Journey of the Human Spirit to the children as a bedtime story. This led to Watson forming the ambition, at age 12, to sail around the world. In planning her trip, Watson conferred with an official of the World Sailing Speed Record Council for the criteria for a global circumnavigation. A vessel must start from and return to the same point, must cross all meridians of longitude and must cross the equator. The shortest orthodromic track of the vessel must be at least 21,600 nautical miles. Officially announced in May 2009, the journey was expected to take 8 months with an estimated sailing distance of 23,000 nautical miles. To fulfill the plan of sailing non-stop and unassisted, during the journey no other person would be allowed to give her anything and she must not moor to any port or other boat, although advice over radio communication would be permitted. During a test run sailing from Brisbane to Sydney, on her first night after leaving Brisbane, Ellis Pink Lady collided with the Silver Yang, a 63,000-ton bulk carrier at about 2 a.m. on the 9th of September 2009 near Point Lookout. Watson's boat was dismasted in the collision. She was able to retain control and return the boat to Southport under motor. Watson sailed out of Sydney Harbour on the 18th of October 2009 in her pink-hulled Elabache-sponsored Ellis Pink Lady. 18 days later, on the 5th of November, she passed Tonga, sailing clear of both New Zealand and Fiji. As required for a full circumnavigation, she crossed the equator on the 19th of November 2009 near Jarvis Island and rounded Kiritimati after 36 days. Then she crossed the equator again and continued southeasterly towards Cape Horn. The sail distance from Sydney to Kiritimati was about 3,900 nautical miles. At Christmas she was near Point Nemo, the place located furthest from land. On the 13th of January 2010 she passed Cape Horn, having sailed around 9,800 nautical miles in 87 days. This was 11 days ahead of the planned 100 nautical miles daily schedule. Soon after, her parents flew over her in a small plane in order to witness the passage. Just over a week later, on the 23rd of January 2010, several days after passing the Falkland Islands, she suffered 4 knockdowns in a severe storm with 10-meter waves and 70-knot winds. The storm caused minor damage to her boat and her emergency beacon was inadvertently activated as the mast hit the water. The halfway point on the voyage was passed on the 25th of January 2010, her 100th day at sea, 11,500 nautical miles based on the original calculation of 23,000 nautical miles sailing route. On the 15th of February 2010, she crossed the Prime Meridian, crossing from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere. This placed her near the Cape of Good Hope, which she passed on the 24th of February, reaching Cape Agulhas, the southernmost point of Africa, and crossing from the Atlantic Ocean into the Indian Ocean. From southern Africa, miles towards Western Australia. Watson arrived in the Australian Economic Zone on the 10th of April 2010, celebrating with crackers and Vegemite. There her parents and media flew over her in a small plane in order to welcome her. She passed Cape Leeuwin on southwestern Australia 2 days later, with approximately 2,500 nautical miles remaining. When south of Australia, Watson suffered a lot of bad weather. In this part of the journey, she had at least 3 knockdowns, one of them with the mast deep into the sea, but escaped with serious damage and injury. The swells she experienced in the Great Australian Bight were up to 12 meters in height, higher than any time before. On the 3rd of May, Watson rounded the southeast Cape of Tasmania and began heading north to Sydney, her final destination. She completed her journey on day 210 of her voyage at 1:53 p.m. on the 15th of May 2010 when she arrived in Sydney Harbour. Her 17th birthday was 3 days later. During the journey, Watson had to repair the boat and the equipment. Several of the repairs were reported: the battery monitor, the stove, the toilet, the mainsail, replacement of wind generator blades, the kettle, and finally the fuel pump of the engine. In the months following the completion of Jessica's journey, there were questions about what would become of her boat, Ellis Pink Lady. In April 2011, after the state and federal governments jointly purchased the yacht for $300,000, it was announced that the Pink Lady would have a permanent exhibition at the Queensland Maritime Museum in Brisbane. Watson's journey has been criticized, particularly after the collision with the freighter. Barry Tyler of Pacific Motor Yacht magazine wrote, "Like the majority of the seafaring world, consider it irresponsible, cavalier and indeed ignorant to attempt such a feat, at such a tender age and with so little trans-ocean experience." Despite criticism, Watson has had her supporters, not only after, but before the departure. In particular, adventurer Don McIntyre strongly supported her attempt, providing her with a boat and speaking in support of her attempt. Similarly, Tony Mowbray, who, like McIntyre, has previously circumnavigated the globe, provided his support, arguing that she was doing it for the right reasons, and that he was confident of her success. Also, adventurer and company owner Richard Branson gave his support before departure. During her journey, others expressed their support for her attempt. Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd said in a public speech on the 26th of January that Jessica Watson is an extraordinary young Australian. At the arrival in Sydney, she was met by thousands of spectators, including then Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. He said, "Jess, welcome back to dry land. Welcome back home to Australia. You know something, you may feel a little wobbly on your feet just now, but in the eyes of all Australians you now stand tall as our newest Australian hero." The crowd then sung a special rendition of Australia's national anthem Advance Australia Fair as a salute to Watson. Since completing her circumnavigation, Watson has been recognized with a number of awards. These include the Spirit of Sport award from the Sport Australia Hall of Fame and Young Performer of the Year for 2010, an award voted by the Australian public and presented at the annual Sports Performer Awards in Melbourne. Watson was named the Australian Geographic Society's Young Adventurer of the Year in 2010. She was selected as one of the 10 International Adventurers of the Year by National Geographic Society and was the only sailor in the group. Watson was named the Young Australian of the Year on the 25th of January 2011. She was selected as one of the entrants to the Who's Who in Australia 2012 edition. Watson was the first female skipper to cross the line in the 2011 Sydney to Hobart and as a result earned the Jane Tate Trophy. Watson received an Order of Australia Medal in the Australia Day Honours List in January 2012 for service to sailing and to youth through the achievement of sailing solo and unassisted around the world, and as a role model for young Australians. In November 2022 she was inducted into the Australian Sailing Hall of Fame. In 2015, Watson was awarded the Leif Erikson Young Explorer Award by the Exploration Museum in Húsavík, Iceland. A television documentary, 210 Days, was made about her circumnavigation. It was narrated by Sir Richard Branson. A movie, True Spirit, about her circumnavigation was produced in Queensland, starring Tegan Croft as Watson. It was produced by Netflix and released on the 3rd of February 2023. Watson wrote a book about her experience, True Spirit, published by Hachette Australia. The book was released the 29th of July 2010. Lesson learned from Jessica Watson: we all have the power to live our dreams no matter how small or big they are.